that he begins as the father goes and talks to him. But let me back up a little bit to let you know that the son that was out in the world was lost. We know that we have to talk about lost people. We know that we often tend to say what people are often doing wrong in the world. But it pains me when you have to turn that thing around and come into church and focus on people in the church and tell them what they are doing wrong. You see, the prodigal son in this parable that Jesus poses, it came about when the Pharisees found that Jesus was talking with sinners, tax collectors, and drunks. They begin to ask him, why are you associating with these people? But Jesus began to let them know now, instead of me answering you directly, I'm going to pose this parable to you. So he began to start out with the son that asked his father for his money so he'd go out and live all kind of ways. He began to focus on the sinner. So you find in this parable there are three people that Luke is dealing with. He's dealing with the lost, he's dealing with the father, and he's dealing with the saved people. So as he began to pose this parable about the son that went away, he turned it around and he began to focus on God the Father. He begins to show us despite how we leave God, how we live all kinds of ways, he goes to show you that God never leaves us. We always leave God. But as soon as we decide and come to ourselves and say, wait a minute, I've got a Father in heaven who cares about me if I decide to do what he asks me to do. So as he turned it around on the Father, can you imagine seeing one of your children that have been gone for a long time? You hadn't heard from them. Don't know how they're living or don't even know if they're eating or got shelter over their head. Can you imagine standing on your front porch seeing that child drive up the driveway? Can you imagine the emotions begin to flood you as you see that lost child that had been gone for so many years? But as the father seen his son coming afar off, the father called his servant and said, go and kill me a calf because we've been to celebrate because my lost child is coming home. Go and fix up the dinner table because he was lost, but now he's coming back home. The father was the one that gave him his possession. The father, the one gave him everything that he squandered or lost. Well, turn around and let's look at the other son. Now, as the other son was out in the fields, tending his father's flock, tending his fields, one of the servants came to him and said, he asked him, why is this celebration going on? The servant, I think he was rejoicing too because he knew that his brother had came home. He told him, now your brother is returning home, and instead of him rejoicing, he got mad.
That's right.
Y'all ain't get that? Somebody been in the world all their life. Walk through the doors of Mitchell Chapel Christian Church. Walks up to the front of the church and you know about their past. May have been a drug dealer. May have been a whoremonger. May have been an alcoholic. But they walk up to the front of the church and he receives Christ, and some self-righteous person sitting there getting mad. Supposed to be saved, sanctified, Holy Ghost filled, getting mad. But when they really start getting mad is when that person that used to be the prostitute, the alcoholic, or the whoremonger, you know they rejoice when they get it like to Christ. But when God starts to elevate them in the church, I hope we ain't got nobody here like that. When God starts to elevate them in the church and they begin to walk in their purpose and walk in their calling, the one that's supposed to be saved, sanctified, Holy Ghost filled, start looking down their noses, start talking about them, start scandalizing their name, and say, who do you think you are? Coming up in God's house, all the life that you used to live. I'm talking about the big brother, the other brother now. The one that's always been in the church. He looked down his nose. The servant said, your father has killed a fatted calf and he's celebrating because your brother is back who was lost. You got to look at the text, though. If you look at the text, he didn't even own him as his brother. Growing up in the same house. Ate at the same table. Had the same father. But then when the father went out because he got angry, he was not willing to go in, and his father came out and began to plead with him. He answered and said to his father, look, for so many years I've been serving you, and I have never neglected a commandment of yours, and yet you have never given me a young goat so that I might celebrate my fruits. Anybody get that? Look, I've been in the church all my life. Look, I've been on this board, that board, but look, this person just came in and now you giving them recognition about something they just begin to do. And you think, I don't supposed to get mad? But then we'll say, for God I live and for God I die. I'll go if I have to go all by myself. We'll say I'll do it if don't nobody else do it. But as soon as somebody raised up and begin to do it, you get mad. Look at somebody and say, why are you mad? I'm almost about ready to be finished with this because I think somebody getting it now. This young man even said, but when this son of yours, he didn't even say my brother. People will disown you in the church when you start doing what God calls you to do. When you're a baby in Christ, they'll pat you on your back. They'll speak encouraging words in your ear. But when you start getting up and start having to put words in their ear, they'll look at you and say, who do you think you are? Do you think you Mr. Big Stuff? But what I've learned as a pastor is that I don't know everything. So I'm willing to hear somebody teach me something. So I listen to them, but even if you don't got a title on your name, you can teach me something. Even though little children can teach us something, but self-righteousness gets in the way. Pride gets in the way. And where pride is, there is destruction, and a fall is on its way.
That's right.
I'm almost finished.
Amen.
Now, look at God. God didn't turn around on him and start counting out his wrongs. God, with his compassionate heart, after this brother here begins to tell the father about his faults, about his other brother's fault, and what baffles me, and y'all help me out now, in verse number 30, he said, but when this son of yours came, who has devoured your wealth with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him. Now, if you know, in the beginning of this parable, you find out that the young son received his money. The Bible says he went away to a far country.
That's right.
Now, what baffles me, and somebody help me out the church if you can. How in the world, if this other brother has been in his father's house all his life, know what his other brother was doing in a far country? Folks that always come out, I seen you down in such and such place. You need to turn around and say, how you seen me here if you wouldn't get yourself? Did y'all get that? How did he know he spent his money on prostitutes?
Come on now.
The word said that his brother received his wealth and he went to a far country. It didn't say he went next door.
That's right.
But how can he say that he spent, and he got specific with it? He spent his money on prostitutes.
Yes.
Now, somebody help me with this. If he know that he spent his money on prostitutes, somebody need to question where was the other brother spending his money also. That thing kind of baffled me when I read that.
That's good.
But as kind and merciful as the father was, he turned around after this guy began to pick out all the faults in his brother. You got fault finders in the church all over. But as he began to pick out the faults of his brother, the father turned around and said, son, you have always been with me. And all that is mine is yours. In other words, I didn't have to give it to you. It was right there freely for you to use it. And he began to say, well, we had to celebrate and rejoice, for this brother of yours who was dead has begun to live, and he was lost, and yet he was found.